I met a woman last year, and we had met each other we'd known each other for like 5 minutes. And she said to me, Mike, do you know what you do? And I'm like, no, I really don't know why people keep telling me what I do, but they enjoy doing that. And I said, no, I don't know. Tell me, what do you think I do? She goes, Mike, you help men that are not used to asking for help. And that seed got planted in the back of my head, and I didn't know what to do with it. And so we started talking about the challenges that men face. And my coach's name is Maggie. She's a wonderful woman. She's been a great asset to me. Love her to death. I said, Maggie, here's the problem. Of course, men have a lot of challenges. People have a lot of challenges. But the problem here is that people are not willing to ask for help when they need it.
Welcome to another Finishing Strong podcast. If you haven't joined us before, Finishing Strong is dedicated to helping people transition from working full-time to something else and to discover and live out their new purpose. I'm excited to be joined today by Mike Van Pelt, founder of True Man Life Coaching. Mike is an author, speaker, coach, and host of the True Man podcast. Mike is dedicated to helping men live their true selves as God intended them to be. Mike offers some great insights and perspectives into the journey men are on and how they can navigate through some challenges and obstacles to be the men they want to be. I know you will enjoy our time together today with Mike. Hey, well, we're excited to have Mike Van Pelt with us today. Mike's an author, a speaker, a coach. And, I reached out to Mike because I saw what he was doing, for the lives of men and people around the country. It was such a good match for what we're trying to do in Finishing Strong. And so listened to a bunch of your podcasts and really have enjoyed what you've done and what you were doing. But you've had a busy year. You've had a hugely busy year with getting at least the pre-sale of your first book going, not your first book, a book going, True Man, True Ways. You've got another one that came out in January called The Art of Connection, 365 Days of Transformational Quotes by Entrepreneurs, Business Owners, and Influencers, which looking forward to. It sounds like a great book to have for talks and things like that. And then another one that's coming out in a few weeks of Cracking the Rich Code. So when do you sleep, first of all? And tell us, just give us a kind of summary, what we can expect from all those books. What's the underlying message that you convey in your work?
It's funny. Thanks for having me on. I love what you're doing. I love the whole Finishing Strong idea. I do sleep most of the time. It's well, or it's in a panic. Yeah. It's funny, Jamie, when I started out on this journey, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't really have a big expectation. I didn't put myself under the weight of that. And really how most of this came about was by the podcast. The podcast really began to lead everything. And what's interesting about the podcast is I had no experience doing anything like that. In fact, when we started the podcast, it was really kind of a spinoff out of our men's small group. So Paul Bailey and I, who met and connected and became brothers in arms in Spartanburg, South Carolina at the time, started our men's small group, and we called it True Man, our True Man small group. And that was based off of Jesus Christ walk on earth as a true man. We felt like, well, hey, there's the best role model. So, that seems easy enough. And, I'm not some marketing whiz, so I just brought it along. We called the podcast that, and Paul and I started the podcast together initially. And I'll be honest, the first time we did it, I set up all the equipment. And Paul and I had to have a little liquid courage in order to get that thing going and hit the record button. But, once we did it, we didn't stop. And he is a financial advisor, and I knew it was going to be difficult for him to keep up on a weekly basis. And so I was planning for that all along. And really where the format has gone to is I have guests on, like you, Jamie. Jamie, you got to come on the podcast. And we talk about how men could be better men, better husbands, and better fathers, and really try to build. I see that as a value add, as a ministry, as discipling, to help guys hear stories. It's not just about having an author on. We have authors on, but you don't become an author unless you have a story. And something has happened in your life that has probably caused you to write a book or do a podcast or become a speaker, whatever the case may be. And so I love these stories because men need them. As men, we think that it's we're all alone in the world with our challenges, and we're not. Other guys have gone down that road, and I think it's important to get those stories out there. So the podcast was really the driver. The books came secondary, and that was meeting, a book publisher who said, "Hey, how would you like to write a book?" And I went, "Well, I would like to write a book. How do you do that?" And this is not easy for a guy who doesn't sit very well, right? I'm like, I want to go, go, go. And so it's a huge challenge for me. The collaborative books that I've done are really great ways to get your feet wet because you do them in conjunction with some other authors, and you don't have to write a whole book, but you could pick a topic to write on and go. And that has been very valuable to me. And then what is beginning to come out of that is the opportunities to get out in front of groups and speak. And I love that probably the best because I love being around people. The podcast is so much fun. It gave me my confidence back, and I love it so dearly much. But I love being around people. And to sit on a computer screen all day, most days it's fun, but it does get tiring. And I love to get out in front of people, and I love talking about success. And so we're working on that right now, and building some talks. I've got a couple of very specific talks that I'm going out and going to utilize. And I, in fact, have joined the National Speakers Association to get around speakers and learn how to become
great. Yeah.
a speaker. So it's I guess, Jamie, what the bottom line is I drink my Kool-Aid. When I work with people, I talk about with people, how do you better your best? How do you get better today than you were yesterday? What's that 1% improvement that you feel like you can make today to be better? That's what I'm striving for, the same thing everybody else is. So I'm an action taker, and that's why I do what I do. So truth be told, Jamie, don't tell anybody this. I'm overly busy, but I'm making it work.
It sounds like you've got a lot of plates spinning, but you're keeping them up there. Tell us one thing about the book that's about to come out, Cracking the Rich Code. What are we going to get out of that?
Well, listen, I'm really excited about this because we did a redesign. I have a business coach too. So if you're a coach, you should have coaches, right? Okay.
Amen. Yeah.
And we really decided towards the tail end of the last year, we needed to focus on the challenges that men were facing. And we went through and we did 12, very strategically, 12 disciples, so you got to have there are plenty more than that, but we narrowed it down to 12. And interestingly enough, what came out of that was, in the back of my mind, I met a woman last year, and we had met each other we'd known each other for like 5 minutes. And she said to me, "Mike, do you know what you do?" And I'm like, "No, I really don't know why people keep telling me what I do, but they enjoy doing that." And I said, "No, I don't know. Tell me, what do you think I do?" She goes, "Mike, you help men that are not used to asking for help." And that seed got planted in the back of my head, and I didn't know what to do with it. And so we started talking about the challenges that men face. And my coach's name is Maggie. She's a wonderful woman. She's been a great asset to me. Love her to death. I said, Maggie, here's the problem. Of course, men have a lot of challenges. People have a lot of challenges, but the problem here is that people are not willing to ask for help when they need it. And so the chapter in this upcoming collaborative book that's going to come out is called The Power of Asking for Help. And I talk about my story and how I was afraid to ask for help and how it all started. And I talk about the importance of asking for help. And this is something that as men, a lot of us we're not very good at it. Okay. We're just not. It's one of the things we're not very good at. We're going to take everything on and go. And, you know, in the chapter in the book, I talked about 4 things that I think hold men back from asking for help: the fear of rejection, the fear of uncertainty, the fear of being found out, and the fear of feeling unworthy. And I think that those 4 fears are 4 of the more predominant reasons that men don't ask for help. And doggone it, we need to stop that. So I'm focusing on that. In fact, that is what is really going to become the centerpiece of my speaking is talking about the power of asking for help.
What do you think? Interesting, when you went through your 4, it's the fear of the fear of the fear of. So at the core, right, the commonality in that is fear. So when you peel that back for men in general, we'll talk a little bit about that in a second, but what do you think drives that? What's so dominant about fear in the lives of men?
I think a lot of us, you know, there's that old saying, fake it till you make it, which is a false way to live, by the way. And so, you know, it comes down to, and John Eldredge likes to talk about this, you know, being a poser, wearing a mask, not being authentic. And a lot of this comes down to being vulnerable. You know, as men, we're not vulnerable. And we don't want people to know that we're hurting. We want everybody to think, you know, it's that Facebook syndrome, man. Everything's hunky dory. I have a big car. I have a big house. My marriage is great. And, you know, that's not reality. You know, I've been married for my wife and I'll celebrate 27 years here in August.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. Our kids are getting older. And, you know, amongst everything that was going on, even today before we recorded, I had to take my son's car up to the body shop because we had a little issue, you know? So and my wife and I talk about all the time. We're like, wow, man, you know, in the middle of everything that seems great, for everything that's great, there's a challenge going on, you know? And how do you handle those challenges? And, you know, I think some of that really comes down to being real, having your identity in Christ, and knowing that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay, guys. If you just feel like sitting in a chair and crying because things aren't going, that's okay. It's okay. And you know, I don't think a lot of us, you know, were raised from that perspective. You know, how do you talk with another man, you know, and have more than an inch deep conversation? And what I always say is those conversations have to be very intentional, intentional. And so, you know, just show you care. And but guys don't do that a lot. Women are great in community, and you know, they have these great, you know, conversations of depth. And I think as men, what we have to realize is that there's tremendous value in being in community where I may not know if I have a question about fathering. Is there somebody in my group, in my community that I can go to and have a real conversation about, you know? And I just think that is critically important for a man to live his best life.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. You refer to yourself sometimes as the comeback coach, and And you've talked about that again. You're good. We're really good with alliterations, and you talk about those the 4 F's of the comeback story. Certainly, Scripture is filled with stories of people who made comebacks, and it's and those are inspiring. What's been part of this work for you, and maybe unpack the 4 F's of the comeback story a little bit, and face faith, formulate, and move forward on there. Tell us about those.
For me, what happened, I think I've always loved comeback stories. I've always loved the underdog, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I like people overcoming the odds. And so for me, what I related this back to really was some things that I'd gone through in my life. I had gone through the job market. I had successes in the job market, but I never felt full about it. Right. I was never doing anything where I got up in the morning and my heart was just singing and I'm just thrilled to death that I get to go do it today. And so, I really went through a lot of challenges and difficulties. And I wanted to understand how I could really serve my fellow man. And at a certain point, it didn't matter. It didn't come down to money, but I, for a while, was a stay-at-home dad. My wife at a certain point said, "Hey, I've got a career. I want you to be happy and fulfilled in what you're doing. Figure it out." And I hadn't completed my college, and my kids were really young, and so I worked with somebody, and we decided, "Hey, I'm going to go back to school." And I went back, completed my degree, and I was doing a lot of nonprofit work at that time, serving my church. And I loved it. I found that I loved it. And I thought, man, this is going to be my career. But what do these nonprofit executives have that I don't have? And a lot of them had master's degrees. So I went back and got my master's degree and a couple other things like, believe it or not, I'm a certified grant writer. I don't talk about that very often because I'm also a leader who believes that I'm not going to tell somebody to do something that I don't know how to do. And so I thought those things were necessary. And really what happened during that time frame was people didn't know what to do with me, right? They're like, okay, now you have this degree work, you got this education, and like, I don't know what to do with you. And I'm like, well, how about hire me? That would be obvious, right? And so I really went through a period of time, quite honestly, where I was not happy with me. If you wanted to throw a dart and hit me between the eyes, you would ask me, "Mike, so what do you do?" And I didn't have an answer for that. And I would literally sometimes just almost come to tears because I couldn't answer that question, because my identity at that point of me was different than what I had to say. And I couldn't even get the words out of my mouth. And I really struggled with that. And that's when I actually decided to start doing my own thing. And that's how Paul and I met. And it was really by being around other men, being exposed to other men, going into depths about some of the things that were hurting us, that were wounding us, going to some men's retreats where I really came alive in my faith and really began to understand this idea of intimacy with God. And so, that was kind of my comeback story, if you will. And I just love that idea. So the 4 F's were basically, that you've got to face what's going on in your life, and you got to take action, if you're going to be successful. And of course, none of it matters if you don't have faith. If Christ isn't at the center of all of that, then, you're not going to be able to move forward. And of course, formula is really nothing more than having a plan, because you can't wing it in life. If you're flying by the seat of your pants, you're just always going to be chasing your tail, and you got to move forward with a positive state of mind. If you're not in a positive state, if you're not being a giver, Hopefully you're not a taker, but if you're not being a giver in your life, if you're not positive, if you're not moving forward, what are you doing? And so that's really where all that came from. And I still love a good comeback story.
That's great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you talk about the offerings that you've got as a coach and helping men face certain challenges. And the tagline on my sign here is that for finishing strong is the challenge to live with purpose, and the kind of the call to live with purpose. And I think it's the scriptures filled. Jesus had a very clear purpose of bringing the kingdom to earth. He espoused his purpose all the time. One of the things that the kind of the segment of life that I'm dealing with is this transition of working full time to something else, right?
Yeah.
Call it retirement, whatever it is, but it's a transition time. And I find so often, the guys in particular, and just kind of leave it to that, where they've had a great purpose, like you said, identity's wrapped up in career and financial success or whatever it is, and then Friday comes, they have a job, they have the retirement party Friday night, and Monday, oh my gosh, what have I done? And they just haven't kind of taken the time to repurpose. And so, how does that work with you? Someone's gonna, we're gonna put your link to your coaching and your website on our website as a resource. And so if someone calls you up and says, hey, I'd love for you to coach me, and this is one of my biggest challenges, just to find my new purpose at this season of my life. What does that look like working with you?
Well, purpose is really everything, right? To a large degree.
Yeah.
And I consider my target really that middle-aged market. And the reason for that is, at that point, guys have lived a little life. They've lived a little life. And I found that a lot of guys are like me. They're thinking about their legacy. Like, it's been pretty good, but I want more, not as in more money. I want to figure out how I can add more value to the world around me and impact the world around me. And there's so many things that go into that. And what I found is that, at that middle age as well, you've had a career, but if it wasn't fulfilling, if it wasn't something that just like, you got up and was like, yeah, man, I love what I'm doing, then you're wondering, well, is there a second act available? How do I, in your case, how do you finish strong, And I think guys start asking a lot of questions, and I think that's good. I think that's good. Yeah. Ultimately, what happens is it comes down to, well, gosh, if I want to do something different, what is my purpose? And so sometimes, as my coach says all the time, we need to slow down in order to speed up. We've got to breathe a little bit. And that's hard to do, because if you've been in corporate America, you're trained to achieve on a quarterly basis, right, wrong, or indifferent. That's just how it works, right? It's one quarter leads to another, and we live in a very fast-paced world. And so to say to somebody, well, we need to slow down, or I'll tell you, one of the greatest things, it's kind of funny the way my schedule lined up this year. I have 2 retreats in October. I ought to be nice and relaxed, or I'll have some incredible epiphany that'll start something all over me. But I love retreats specifically. A lot of the retreats I go on are like Thursday through Sunday. And the reason for that is it's so hard for us to just get away and be around a group of guys, for example, that have the same objective, which is to hear from God and get our heart back. And in order to do that, sometimes you got to go out in the woods somewhere and just get away from it all and hear God speak. And we don't do that. Very well. And what I love about coaching is I know not everybody can break away on a long weekend and do whatever, but we can achieve some of the same results by going through the coaching relationship because we can slow down enough to peel back the onion. And there's no agenda, so to speak, in terms of, well, we need to have this done by X, Y, and Z, or it's a complete failure. That's just not the case. I look at it as we'll take the amount of time that it takes, because in most cases, I find, we're unpacking a lot of different things in a man's life, and so, a lot of times you don't get to the purpose part of what somebody wants until we heal from something else or we address something else, whatever it is. It's different for everybody. And I know that it was that way for me. And, what really pushed me over the edge was that understanding that God wanted an intimate relationship with me. And when that showed up, everything else changed.
Yeah.
And it hasn't slowed down since.
Yeah, well, that's good. Well, and following up to that, the healing word that you just said. So I believe people are wounded, right? And that oftentimes it's those wounds that keep us from moving forward, from moving through or coming back. And Richard Rohr has said, if we don't transform our wounds, we will transmit them. And I was in ministry for a number of years called Marked Men for Christ, and we did take that weekend retreat, got guys away for a weekend, and we gave them a chance to work on 5 wounds in their life. It was deceit and denial, fear, anger, sadness, and shame.
Yeah.
And as I looked through your materials, there was certainly an intersection on many of them, but in my experience on leading those weekends for years, that often dominated by anger and shame were the 2 biggest wounds that men in particular were dealing with. What does that look like? I'm asking you for some encouragement for men who hear this and connect to either of those and I'd love someone to process this with. So first, what's your encouragement for men who feel like they're stuck in the moment too? What would that look like working with you?
Well, the encouragement piece of it would be that, you can overcome that shame. You can overcome those things that have happened in your past, or happened to you. Whatever the case may be. There's work involved in that. Maybe as there should be. But I think that the most important thing I could tell somebody is that, our God is a healing God, and he wants to see you healed and well. And so what I often find, and I've done the same thing, is, we bury stuff. We just bury it and we hope we don't have to deal with it. And that usually comes out in anger, right? Or it comes out in shame, or it comes out in resentment. And unfortunately, typically the people that it comes out in front of are the very people that are in front of you, your children, your wife. And, it's unfortunate that they take the brunt of it. And so, I would say to guys that, and I commonly say this, you are worthy of more. You're worthy. And I think that a lot of guys come to it going, well, this and this happened to me, when I was 7 years old. Well, you're worthy of more, and it hurts to hear those stories, because you don't want to ever hear that anybody's hurt over that, whatever they've gone through. But, there is every reason to be hopeful and optimistic that they can have a better life. And that's kind of how
So
I look at it.
what would that process look like going through you? What would gonna unpack a section on shame?
I think it starts with talking about things. Now, I will say I'm not, and I commonly say this, I'm not a counselor.
Yeah, right.
If there is something serious going on with somebody that requires medical expertise, that is above my pay grade, and I will certainly get somebody the help that they need and help them find it.
Mhm.
But I think it comes down to just coaching and being a guide and a resource for somebody. You know, most of the time, what I have found is that people have held something back or they've held it inside. Yes, it was out of shame, but they just didn't trust anybody to talk to about it, or they didn't have anybody around to talk to about it. And so if somebody's willing to talk about it, a lot of times it's just nothing more than listening.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and
yeah. Good.
I'm
Good
a
for you.
big believer that we all have the answers deep inside of us. And that may look like nothing more than, listening to them and saying something like, how do you feel you can change where you're at? I mean, maybe they've never
Yeah,
even considered that question,
yeah,
you know?
yeah,
And
yeah,
so a lot of it comes down to the depth of questioning based on, where they're at. I think people ask me quite a bit about coaching. And I always think it's important to point out that one of the terms I really hate, and unfortunately some people use it, is I help fix people.
oh, yeah,
I I don't, I can't fix anybody. I'm not waving a magic wand. I don't like that
yeah,
word. Um, you know, I, I guide people to help them get to a better place in their life. And hopefully we can do that, you know? Um, if I can't do it, again, I'm going to find somebody that can, we can bring in and do it. But, a lot of the time it just comes down to having somebody you can trust to talk to. It really
yeah,
does, you know,
yeah, yeah,
and because we're built for a relationship. And I was having this conversation the other day. I mean, you don't have to go back. All you have to do is look in the first few chapters of the Bible. And Eve was created for Adam. Why? For companionship. We are not meant to be alone. We are meant to be in community and live amongst each other. And so we're built for that. It's a part of our DNA. And I think it's important for guys to know and understand that, because holding stuff inside is going to hold you back.
yeah, yeah. That's one of when I do my research on this season that I'm in and that people are in that I'm talking to and now coaching. There's some common threads from all the authors and all the materials and everything. And one of those threads is can't do this in isolation. And
Oh,
that's it's one of the biggest
yeah.
purpose. And doing this season of life in isolation are two formulas for a poor transition from working full time to something.
Can I add to
Shift.
that, Jamie?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can
Yeah,
I
yeah,
add to
please
that?
do.
It's interesting. The other day, and I'm very aware of the whole isolation issue, but I'm a member of a local Rotary here, so I'm a big supporter of Rotary, and we got our latest magazine, and I was looking at it, and they were talking about something involving Rotary, and I thought this was interesting. This is something that the Surgeon General had recently said, and I hadn't come across this, so I'm just going to go ahead and read this. And he's talking about connections and relationships. And the U.S. Surgeon General recently declared loneliness a public health epidemic. Dr. Vivek Murthy said we must prioritize building social connections the same way we have prioritized other critical public health issues such as tobacco, obesity, and substance abuse disorders. And what's really bothersome about this is middle-aged men in the United States are taking their lives faster than any other age bracket.
Mm.
And, for the most part, doctors really don't know why, but my best guess is that it comes down to the relationships or lack thereof that they have in their lives, and just, not having a community to go to, because loneliness is a huge epidemic in particularly as the older a man gets, the fewer friends that he has, which is unfortunate because they're at that sage point of life where they could just be pouring into people.
Yeah, I know. No, I know. Well, thank you for that stat. I will, we'll put that quote in the show notes, but also I think just to use that as well in some of my materials. It is,
Yeah.
thank you for that. So wrap up with this, that you've got the title True Man, and I know you had a guest on a few weeks ago, might have been a couple months ago, on talking about masculinity. And so there's certainly some controversy, right? There is definitely a toxic masculinity, and there's different ways that people experience masculinity. But what I love about you, your focus is kind of, you refer to true, and your true north is Jesus. And so tell us about, like, when your experience working with men, working with people, what are some of the characteristics of a true man, and that you weave masculinity in there, how you want to weave it in there?
Yeah, I get this question quite often, and my answer may surprise you a little bit because I have chosen to some degree not to define it. And here's why.
Yeah.
I think that every man needs to define what a true man is for himself. Now, I will say I'm a huge fan of the show The Chosen, and there's and this is, I mean, it's straight out of the Bible, but there's a particular scene that really, really hit me, and it's when Jesus is asking his future disciples to cast their net out over the boat, and it's that moment that Jesus says to Peter, "Follow me, follow me." And when I kept replaying that, replaying it, and I thought to myself, that's what a true man is. That's what a true man is, really. And so I really think of it as just following Jesus as a model. And I think that that's what true masculinity is just being able to share joy and hope and wisdom and love. A lot of those come out of the fruit of the spirit, by the way. So to me, that's what it really comes down to. But I really kind of leave it up to everybody else to define for themselves. And I kind of enjoy what people have to say and what I hear, regarding it. Toxic masculinity. Listen, there are bad people everywhere. Guys do bad things sometimes, and just because some of the people that, I'll say that are quote unquote famous, that get on the news and we hear all these stories about all the stuff that they did, is that toxic? Well, it's not good. It's not good, but that doesn't mean every man is bad. You can't take one guy and go, well, every man is this or that. And so, it's toxic masculinity is something that I found, some politicians, some Hollywood types, some media types want to toss around and try to connect bad guys to. And, I'm not, whatever.
Yeah, no, I liked your first part of, hey, it's sort of every man's journey and it looks different, and probably I'm glad to hear you not put it into a box to say this is what it looks like, because it is. We're all created very differently.
I thought about it for a long time. It was, it was really one of those one of the things, I bet you can appreciate this too, that I've gotten increasingly better at, and I've studied and I'm exposed to people that are teaching me, is discernment.
Mhm.
How can I be a better thinker?
Mhm.
And, the first thing that I've found is that not every decision has to be instantaneous.
Yeah.
Sometimes it requires a pause to ponder or think, and that's a good thing. And this was certainly one of those, because, people wanted to know, well, what do you think a true man is?
Mhm.
And I know what it is for me, but it may be different. You put different words around it. No different than your vision statement or your purpose statement or your goals. We may have similar, but they're different. Right?
Yeah, no. Well, thank you so much. You've got so much rich material that hopefully you'll be willing to come back again, and we might unpack a
Absolutely.
few of those things individually. But we really appreciate you being here for us today. Again, a lot of information about you in the show notes and on the website for Finishing Strong. So thanks, Mike. We appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me on, Jamie. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining our podcast today. You can learn more about Mike and options that he offers for coaching and speaking at www.truemanlifecoaching.com. You can also learn more about us at www.finishing-strong.org, where you can also register for one of our upcoming events.